Well, hello and welcome to episode 18 of the EnglishAnyone.com Power Learning Podcast. I'm Drew Badger, the co-founder of EnglishAnyone.com. I'm an author and an English speaking confidence expert, and it is a pleasure to be joining you again today. I hope you've been enjoying all of the podcast episodes. Be sure to visit EnglishAnyone.com where you can listen to all of them, including this episode, and you can also listen to them on YouTube and iTunes as well. Well, it's kind of a rainy day. Actually, it's a very rainy day here in Nagasaki, Japan, so I'm kind of stuck inside. I really wanted to go out and play some basketball today, but, well, I guess I will be in here recording this, but I'm really excited about this episode. It's going to be a great episode with a lot of things I'm interested in, plus a lot of great tips that'll help you get fluent in English faster. So what will we be talking about today? Today we will be discussing video games and specifically speedrunning video games and how that can apply to English learning and really getting fluent in English faster or doing any skill it is and you want to be able to achieve successful results much, much faster. So let's get into today's episode. Now, before we get into video games specifically, I wanted to kind of answer a general question that a lot of people have. It's a discussion that comes up a lot between English teachers and also learners, or kind of just language learners and educators in general. But is there a specific best method for learning a new language? Now, I'll just come out and say very clearly and quickly that no, there is not one best method, but I will say that just because there isn't one best way to do something, that doesn't mean that there aren't different levels or different approaches where something can be better than another thing, depending on what you're interested in doing and also who is doing the learning. So as an example, let's say I want to travel from Florida to New York. Now, you could say that, well, there's no one best way to get there, but again, the best way to do something depends on you, but also on what your goals are. So if you want to see every single inch of the country from Florida to New York, maybe walking is going to be your best bet. So again, we have to be very specific about what we're talking about here. Now, what I do at EnglishAnyone.com is really help people focus on fast fluency and then learning how to build speaking confidence so they can get out and practice on their own and do lots more things and achieve the goals that they have much, much faster. So if in the example of traveling from Florida to New York, if you say, well, I really just want to get there quickly, I would probably recommend you take an airplane for that. So again, you have to think about what your goals are, and then from that goal you can decide on the actual strategy, and then that's when you kind of move from there and can begin doing whatever it is you want. So remember to be very clear and focused when you're deciding about what it is you want. And the more clear you can be about the goal you have, the more specific the things and the advice that you can receive and the actual tactics and strategy that you can use when you're trying to get there. So in total, in sum, even though there may not be one best way to do something, there really is a best way to do something for a particular person in a particular situation, depending on what the goals are. Even Master English Conversation, it continues to evolve as I learn more. So as I can talk with new members and learn more about other people that are interested in becoming fluent, I can learn more from them and how they like to learn, and also, learning more about the science behind fluency to continue improving the lesson sets. Well, let's get back actually into video games now that we've kind of settled that question a little bit. Remember that you don't have to think about a best way to do something. Begin with the goals and then think about the best way to do something from that. Well, moving on to video games and specifically speedrunning video games. Now, if you're not familiar, this is one of the categories of video on YouTube right now that's probably one of the most popular, if not the most popular kind of video that you can watch on YouTube right now. And basically, there are many different kinds of video game walkthroughs. I actually talked about this with Richard in an episode or a lesson set of Master English Conversation, but there are kind of the typical walkthroughs where you go through and actually look at all the items and try to find everything, and this can be even with commentary where people are explaining how something can work or how something can't work. And if you've never seen a video game played on YouTube before, it can be really entertaining to watch. But one of the things that I've been watching recently is a collection of speed runs by Awesome Games Done Quick. Now, this is a group of people that get together to do speed runs, and it's a benefit for cancer. Usually they're trying to raise money for cancer or maybe something else. But basically, you get to watch, you'll have kind of a split screen where half of the screen is the video game being played and the other half is the person or people that are playing the game, and they're describing what's happening in it and saying what tricks they're doing and other things like that. Now, what's interesting for me is that when I watch these things, I remember back many years ago, because I don't have any video games right now. I don't have a PlayStation or a Nintendo or anything, actually. I don't even really watch TV very much, but so that's why I can get on YouTube and have a little bit of nostalgia. I can remember things from the past and enjoy that, so I can watch old video games and remember the music and playing it, and it's fun for me like that. But watching now these Awesome Games Done Quick, these speed runs, this is where people try to use the kind of glitches, and a glitch is like a problem in a game, like if you move in a certain way and the character flies up in the air. The game isn't designed to do that, but sometimes you can trick the game into making it do weird kind of things. So that's what a speed run is. The speed run is basically, again, trying to move from the beginning to the end of the game as quickly as possible, and within that you can do maybe something like a 100% speed run where you try to do everything, or you just try to complete the game as quickly as possible. Now, the reason I'm talking about video games is because they really have a lot to teach us, and especially speedrunning, about how to get fluent in English faster. So let's get into, kind of a couple of the different things, some of the really important things that we can learn from video games and speedrunning specifically if you want to become a fluent English speaker quickly. So to begin talking about video games and specifically speedrunning and how that applies to language learning, I want really you to remember the goal, strategy, tactics formula for English speaking success. And again, that's for success in anything it is you want to do. So you begin with the goal, just like traveling from Florida to New York earlier in this episode, and then you decide on the strategy and the tactics after that. Now, when I'm watching these speed runs, and again, I highly recommend you check them out. You can just look up speed running right here on YouTube if you're watching this on YouTube, or come to YouTube and watch them there. But the, one game that I played, maybe many, many years ago, it would take me like many weeks to complete. Like The Legend of Zelda was a favorite of mine. So I had a Super Nintendo, and when I would try to play, the old Legend of Zelda games, or a Nintendo 64, and it would take me a really long time to beat those. And then I would sit and watch these people now playing the games, and they would beat it in 2 hours. And it's incredible what they can do. Now, they might not go through and play everything, but again, that's the goal. They begin with, do they want to have a 100% run, or they just want to complete the game, even if they're not going through all of the bosses and all of the things that they have to do when they're playing the game. But they're, again, deciding on the goal and then figuring out what's the best way to do that. So remember, you begin with the goal, then move to strategy, and then move to tactics. So instead of just playing a whole game and taking a really long time to do that, you can decide, do you want to move into something and do it much quicker? And once you decide what it is you want, then your brain begins to change, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But making a decision and having a very specific goal first, it really helps you focus on what it is you want, and it kind of reveals new things, which we'll talk about a little bit later. So we've got the Zelda example. Another one that I've seen recently is Mario 64, which is another really popular game that I also enjoyed playing. And you can beat it in, maybe like 2 hours or something like that, which is incredible. And to watch the skill of these players when they go through these games, it's like watching a confident athlete run through a field because they know exactly what they're going to do, and they know they'll win because they practiced it and they reviewed it and they visualized what they're going to do many, many times. So let's talk a little bit more specifically about the second thing, and this is looking at things in a new way. And this is really important, and it also comes from the goal. So again, I want to keep stressing this because it's really, really important. You want to decide the goal first, and then from the goal, the strategies and the tactics will come from that. Now, before we talk about the video game specifically, I want to talk about, kind of bring you back to my college days. And one of my first classes when I was a young philosophy student back in college, I was learning about how we decide what something is. You know, when we classify something, you can look at a chair and then we would call it a certain thing. And there are different branches of philosophy that answer that question, the question of what is this, in different ways. So if I am thinking that there is only one specific way to do something, and I look at a chair and think that, well, this is just something for sitting, and that's what I classify that as. So the chair is something for sitting on. But you can also use it to block a door, or you can use it to, do something else. You could stand on it and reach something that's high up that you can't reach by just standing and reaching normally. So when you think about the question of what is this, you begin to open up your mind, and if you think, well, it can only be one thing, then you close your mind off. So to keep your mind open, and in the same way of playing a video game and looking for new strategies in that game or new ways of looking at something, it's the same thing for becoming fluent in another language. So when you look at, again, the chair example, I can see that as something for sitting on, but if I only see it as that, I won't be able to use it to stand on, to reach something, or to block a door, or do other things like that with the chair. So always keep your mind open, and even if one thing may be designed for a certain purpose, you could actually start using it in a different way if you begin to think about it differently. So always keep your mind open. Now, the specific video game example of this that I really like, and this is if you've never seen a speed run before, it's almost the exact opposite of what normal people would do when they play a video game, and that is intentionally get injured or hurt in a video game. Now, when you usually play a video game, especially you watch, young players or new players to a video game, they're being very careful and cautious. And this is really important, so listen very carefully to this explanation here. It's very, very applicable to language learning. So young players or new players to a video game, especially I remember watching Mario Brothers, when I was very, very young. That was really the first video game I played on the original Nintendo. And I would be very careful about not getting hit by the enemies. I would have to jump over them, and I was just being very, very cautious, and I had very little confidence in myself for playing that. But watching players go through and play a video game now, sometimes they will intentionally get hit to give them a speed boost where they're trying to move from one area of the game to another. Now, what's interesting about this is that they're intentionally getting injured in order to do something, which is the exact opposite of what most players would do. And the reason they're doing that is because, again, they're beginning with a larger goal and working from there. If the goal is to not get injured at all, then maybe they're going to go through the game much more slowly. But if the game goal is a speed run and you want to move through the game as quickly as possible, what you want to do is sometimes, when it's advantageous to do so, is jump into an enemy and have it speed you off in another direction. So you can do that in a variety of different ways, but usually it's called a damage boost. So a boost, you get some extra power or energy, but really you're using the kind of the recoil, and the recoil is when you get hit and you bounce back a little bit, but you turn your character and have it shoot you forward in the way you want to go. So again, remember to think about things from the goal first. And if you just ask the question, do I want to get injured by a boss, or do I want to get hurt by an enemy or not, you can't start from that question. You have to start from the goal. Just like you can't say, what is the best way to learn a language? You have to begin with the goal. Do you want to learn it quickly? Do you want to become a good writer? Do you want to do these other things? And from there, you move on to fluency. Interestingly enough, the same principle also applies in stock trading. I remember reading about this when I was younger and I was interested in the stock market and learning about business and investing, that kind of thing. And I was reading a really interesting book. I believe it was called Market Masters. Now, I don't remember if that was the name of the book or not, but it was about a couple of different people that were really good at stock investing. And again, they had the same thing in mind. They began with a goal of, I want to spend a certain amount of money and I'm going to have a strategy that if I lose a little bit, I will sell that stock and then I will buy something else. So what's happening here is that even though they're getting injured a little bit, maybe they spend $10 to buy a stock and then the stock price goes down a little bit and they'll sell that, they have maybe 1 out of 10 stocks that does incredibly well. So they have a specific strategy that they will buy something and then sell it if it goes down, and if it continues to go up, they will just let it continue to go up. The same thing happens in pay-per-click advertising, which is also really interesting. The point is not to spend the least amount of money possible. Really what you want to do is be able to spend the most amount of money, because the person that can spend the most amount of money is the one that's probably going to win in that market. So you may lose a little bit more money on a particular transaction, but if you can make more money in the long run because that's your strategy, then that's going to be really beneficial to you. So getting back to the video games, again, we've got the same thing. It comes up in many different areas of life, and I really want you to remember that. So we've got video games, advertising, stock market trades, and then for fluency as well. So the exact parallel here is actually forcing yourself to be in situations where you could get kind of injured a little bit, just like you would in a video game. And these are why you actually try to make mistakes. So you go through a situation where you actually try to make mistakes and try to get into a position where you could kind of hurt yourself a little bit, but it's part of the larger strategy of working faster to get into fluency faster, because the faster you make these mistakes, the faster you learn from them. So I hope you can really take that and kind of, when you're speaking in English or whatever other language you're studying, think of yourself as a video game character moving through in a speed run. So again, you want to get injured sometimes because that's what's going to push you faster towards the goals that you have. It's a really different way of looking at something, where instead of being like a new player and you're getting really nervous and you're losing confidence and you're very cautious about something, you kind of jump bravely into a situation, but know that having mistakes and certain kinds of mistakes are the things that will propel you to fluency much, much faster. Moving on to the third and final thing that we can learn from speedrunning and video games is the road to mastery. Now, if you think about people that are playing speedrunning games, they've really been practicing, and there are whole communities about these things. Some people will spend years actually going through a particular video game that they like, testing lots of different things, how they can figure out how maybe they can get this glitch to do something, and after all of that, they've used that and they can combine that information with what other people have found, and they can turn a game that maybe would take 30 hours and turn it into something that's only 2 hours. And the same thing, it's exactly the same thing for learning a language. When people talk about repetition being the key to learning and the key to mastery, it's important to remember that mastery doesn't mean doing the exact same thing over and over and over again, because that can get boring. What you want to do is take something that you're really excited about and start experimenting with it. How can I take something I'm learning and teach it to others? Could I write it? Could I read it? Could I say it? Could I think about it in my mind? There are lots of different ways to review something, and the more you play with something, the more you become the master of it. You actually gain mastery over that thing. And that's a sense of power, just like the speedrunners that know they're going to work through a game and they know how to do something and they can do it so well that they've built up confidence. But what confidence really is, it's mastery over something. You know you're going to get in there and do it. So we can think of master of something, but really it's mastery over that thing. You really kind of dominate that thing, but in a positive way. And that's what you should really be doing, and that's what building confidence is all about. So you don't have to do the same thing like members, when I talk to them about not using the same lessons over and over and over again in the same way. They should be taking those things and then teaching them to others. They should be trying to read and write the things that they learn. How can they try to say them in a different way or learn more about that information? Remember to question everything when you're learning, or even if you're just playing a video game. Could a wall be used for jumping up something, or could you maybe go through the wall somehow, or could there be even a different way to do it? Again, this comes back to that question of what is this, or what is this for? Is the chair used for sitting, or is the chair used for, standing on so I can reach something? When you open your mind and have that specific goal from the beginning, then that's what's going to lead you from the strategy and then on to the tactics and to experimentation. And that's where you really get to improve. You gain mastery over something, you take control of it, and that leads you to fluency and then ultimately to freedom. So whatever it is you're interested in doing, that success, all of those things begin with the original goal that you have and then being able to open your mind and experiment with things. To learn more about this, I highly recommend, especially, whether you've been a video game player or not, watch some of the speed runs online, especially the Awesome Games Done Quick series. It's a lot of great players from all over the world that do lots of fun games. One of the probably maybe top 10, if not maybe the top game that people really like to speedrun is Super Metroid, Metroid, Metroid. Now this is a classic game, but this is for the Super Nintendo, and there are so many different things you can do with it. It's also a very technical game, so you have to be very precise about how you do certain things, and you can go through the game and even fight the bosses in the order in which they're not intended. So you could start with the last boss and move back to the first one and then go on to beat the game. So there's lots of different things you can do, but you should be watching that and see how a player will look at one thing that maybe a normal player would see, and then they would see it differently, because again, they're questioning people. And it's really good way to see examples of this happening in real life, where people are looking at one thing that normal people would see in one way and they see it in a different way. So I highly recommend Super Metroid or Secret of Mana, which was another great game that I played when I was younger but did not beat. And I was watching maybe a week ago, watching some players go through that together. And what was really interesting is they didn't even play a couple of the bosses. They were able to do some really interesting glitches with the game that were able to make them do things in a different way. So again, I can't stress that enough. I'm going to be saying this over and over and over again because I really want you to remember it. Mastery is all about beginning with the goal first, then moving on to the strategy. Decide what the specific goal it is you want, and then move on to how you can think about the best way to do something. So go out today, if you can, watch on YouTube or some other place, find some really great videos of people playing through speed runs specifically, and then watch how they do things differently. Again, Super Metroid, Super Mario Brothers, Legend of Zelda, all of these classic games that you can see in new ways. So most people that even if they didn't play them themselves, they're probably familiar with the game. But to see somebody that's really done something, that's a master of something, just like a master of a different language, the person that's done that, they've gone on to experiment and they've gained mastery over that thing, and that's what gives them confidence. So you can see what that looks like, and it will give you the confidence to want to explore more and learn more about fluency for yourself. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this podcast episode. Be sure again to go out and start watching some things, not just even video games, but watching people that are masters of anything they do, and watch what they do. Watch how they see things in a different way that most people don't see them, and watch how that changes them and builds their confidence up. And if you're interested in learning more about how you can speak confidently faster and have better conversations with people, have a lot more friends and a lot more traveling opportunities because you have the confidence to go out and speak, I highly recommend you try Master English Conversation. You can click on the link right here in the video or below the video if you're listening to this on mobile, or if you're on iTunes, you can come back to EnglishAnyone.com and check out Master English Conversation there. It is specifically for people that really want to get fluent very, very quickly and that want to know the exact strategies and tactics that will help them do that. So if that's your goal, come and check out Master English Conversation. Have a fantastic day, and I will see you in the next episode of the Power Learning Podcast. Bye-bye.